Hey guys, so today we're looking at a video called Jan Zizka, the Undefeated Czech General, the Medieval Wars. This is a part of like the few videos we've been looking at the past few days, like the Battle of Lipany and the context behind, or the history rather, behind, what was it again? What was the game called? Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, yes. So, yeah, overall, we actually were introduced to this guy during the Battle of Lipany. Mainly his innovative use of wagon warfare, I think, is what really caught my attention about him. Because the dude was really good with those wagons and using them for war. So that was pretty cool. I'm looking forward to seeing, hopefully, a little bit more about him. I heard he was undefeated in battles, so that's pretty great. That's a pretty cool record to have. And yeah, I don't really have much else to say other than I should probably get to the video already. So this is from Kings and Generals, and if you want to watch the original video, the link is down in the description down below. And yeah, if you want to help support my channel in any way, shape, or form, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. It would really help my small but humble channel out, and I would really appreciate it. Now with that said, and now without any further ado, let's get to it, shall we?
In our present day, Czechia is known for being the motherland of Pilsners and the homeland of star hockey players. However, back in the early 1400s, it was a place of ungovernable vigilantes, deadly political intrigue, and simmering religious turmoil. In this tumultuous century, daring men would be forged in the crucible of battle, living lives more remarkable than any fiction. One of these men was Jan Zizka, one of medieval Europe's most dynamic generals. In this video, we will explore the story of a man who led a troop of heretical underdogs in a stubborn resistance against the seemingly invincible might of the Holy Roman Empire and the Catholic Church, becoming a national hero of the Czech people in the process. Since 1198, the Kingdom of Bohemia, the land of the Slavic Czech people, had existed as an autonomous member state of Europe's most eclectic political entity, the Holy Roman Empire. During the reign of Holy Roman Emperor Charles IV, a descendant of ancient Germanic Luxembourg and Slavic Przemyslid dynasties, Bohemia enjoyed a period of prosperity, while Prague, the emperor's seat of power, became arguably the most important city in Europe. However, when Emperor Charles died in 1378, he split his many holdings between his sons, with Wenceslaus IV ascending as King of Bohemia. Regarded by his nobility as a neglectful, drunken, and hedonistic wastrel, Wenceslaus never enjoyed his father's popularity and would deal with insurrection and rebellion his entire reign. To add yet another element of conflict, this proverbial blood in the water would attract the territorial ambitions of Wenceslaus's half-brother, King Sigismund of Hungary. It is here, in the Bohemian kingdom full of political instability, that we will finally introduce the main character of our story. Very little is known about the early life of Jan Zizka, partially due to the later efforts of the Catholic Church to eradicate records of his existence. It is assumed he was born sometime during the 1360s, in the town of Trocnova, to a family of the lower nobility. It seems that even as a boy, Jan was a scrapper, and some of his biographers claim that he gained his famously cyclopean visage quite early, losing an eye in a brawl with some of his boyhood friends.
Dang.
Much like many other families of the Bohemian gentry at the time, Zizka's was under a great deal of financial strain. In 1384, he was forced to sell his family's ancestral holdings, effectively rendering him landless and destitute. Zizka next emerges in the written record in 1392, when the Bohemian royal accounts mention him serving as a king's huntsman. It must have been a reasonably comfortable life, but among the highest levels of Bohemian society, a storm was brewing. And soon, Jan Zizka's first trial by fire would be upon him. In 1394, a coalition of Bohemian upper nobles, loosely led by one Henry of Rosenberg, revolted against their king. In this, they were implicitly supported by King Sigismund of Hungary, who took advantage of the chaos in his half-brother Wenceslaus's realm to forward his claims to his half-brother's lands. Soon, the king and the nobles began raising mercenary bands to confront one another. Over the next decade, Zizka became a soldier of fortune. He joined a rowdy marauder band loyal to King Wenceslaus and under the leadership of gang leader Matej Wódz, who primarily terrorized the properties and estates of the rebel magnate Henry of Rosenberg. Our knowledge of Zizka's exploits during these years is patchy, but generally speaking, he lived as a borderline outlaw, burning farms, stealing cattle, waylaying traveling merchants, and conspiring with other gangs to conquer entire towns and castles. Crafty and deadly, Zizka soon began distinguishing himself as a capable guerrilla fighter. Soon, the political situation at the highest level had changed. Despite being captured and basically deposed by Sigismund back in 1402, King Wenceslaus had since managed to wriggle his way back onto the throne of Bohemia and establish diplomatic overtures with Henry of Rosenberg, appeasing the League of Nobles who had long defied him and calming the situation in his kingdom. In 1409, Zizka's bandit leader, Matej Wódz, was captured and tortured to death by pro-Rosenberg forces of the city of Bydgoszcz. However, before Zizka could suffer the same fate, he was delivered a royal decree by the king, giving Zizka amnesty for all his crimes. Zizka is next seen a year later, having been hired to fight as a foreign mercenary on behalf of King Władysław of Poland against the mighty Teutonic Order. According to the Polish chronicler Jan Długosz, Zizka was present at the 1410 Battle of Grunwald, arguably the largest battle ever fought in medieval Europe. Zizka's participation in this battle has since been heavily romanticized by pan-Slavicists who wish to portray him as a Czech hero helping his Polish brothers against the tyrannical German Teutons. However, it is likely that Zizka didn't actually see direct action at Grunwald. That said, he did participate in the successful defense of Radzyń-Helmiński Castle against a force of Teutons shortly after. No longer a semi-legal bandit, but a battle-hardened war hero, Zizka returned to Bohemia in 1411, just in time for him to get swept up in one of the bloodiest religious conflicts in medieval European history. The 14th and 15th centuries were an odious time for the Catholic Church. In 1378, the Church had split in two, with popes in Avignon contesting the legitimacy of the popes in Rome, and in 1409, an additional pope in Pisa made it a total of 3 separate bishops simultaneously claiming to be the true head of the Catholic world. In Bohemia,
a lot of this we did cover in the context of, when we saw the video, the history behind Kingdom Come, Deliverance 2 and whatnot. So a lot of this is kind of review, but I'll say the history of the papacy is one of the wildest things ever. Like with the Pope Wars, the anti-popes, like a lot has happened in the papacy that's like so interesting on its own. A part of me kind of wants to talk more and like cover more about it because like a lot's happened. But yeah, like his life is very interesting. From humble origins to a huntsman to an outlaw to now a battle-hardened soldier, and soon as we're about to see a commander and leader. Like, he's had quite the life, hasn't he? Leveling up all these different stages. Like, very interesting.
Content with the Mother Church had risen to a bubbling simmer. General corruption and greed within the ecclesiastics had become the norm, with practices like indulgences having become commonplace, wherein the clergy squeezed the wealth out of their flock by convincing people to buy their way into heaven.
Yep.
Eventually, anti-Catholic sentiment among the Czechs manifested in one man, a rector at Prague University, Jan Hus. Hus was a firebrand preacher, railing against the nepotism and debauchery of the church. His words stirred the hearts of many throughout Bohemia, including Wenceslaus's royal wife, Queen Sophia of Bavaria, who took Hus as her personal confessor. Meanwhile, a certain Jan Zizka had landed a prestigious position as bodyguard to the royal family since returning from Poland. Developing deep respect for Hus, Zizka became an ardent disciple of the disruptive theologian. Soon, however, Hus's teachings got him excommunicated by the pontificate. Fearing yet more internal turmoil brewing in his kingdom, Wenceslaus convinced Hus to go into voluntary exile in 1412. However, at this point, the hapless Wenceslaus was not the true power in Bohemia. That distinction belonged to none other than his scheming half-brother, King Sigismund of Hungary. In 1415, Sigismund invited Hus to the Ecumenical Council of Constance, offering the Czech preacher a royal guarantee of safety in return for a chance to settle his doctrinal differences with the church. This went about as well as one might expect. As it turns out, Sigismund's promise of protection meant nothing, as Catholic enforcers promptly arrested Hus at Constance and burned him at the stake on the 6th of July, 1415.
Yeah, that was wild.
Of course, all this accomplished was to make Hus into a martyr, and throughout Bohemia, thousands rose up in religious revolution, declaring themselves Hussites in honor of their fallen shepherd. On July 30th, 1419, a Hussite prince, Jan Zalewski, led an angry mob through the streets of Prague, stormed Town Hall, demanded the release of Hussite prisoners captured under the orders of King Wenceslaus, and when that failed, defenestrated the king's representatives in the city council. Funnily enough, this would not be the last time in history that throwing some guys out of a window in Prague would cause a—
Yeah, what is with Prong? I mentioned this in the Battle of Lipany video, but what is with, like, Prong being the source of all these religious wars and, like, guys getting thrown out the window? Like, that's like, man, like, I can go to Prong right now and throw a guy out of a window, and I assure you I could start a holy war, because the fact, if I had a nickel for every time this happened, so far I would have two, but it's funny that it's happened twice. You know?
brutal religious conflict. Meanwhile, the conclusion of the Council of Constance in 1418 had mended the papal schism, allowing the newly reunified Catholic Church to focus fully on crushing the Slavic heresy in Bohemia. In this, they had a champion, Sigismund, King of Bohemia. Indeed, King Wenceslaus, beset by turmoil and rebellion all his life, had finally had too much, and after the defenestration of Prague, had died of a stroke. Thus, Sigismund inherited the kingdom he had long been conspiring to seize. Of course, Sigismund had little actual control over Bohemia, for most of the country's native Czech population had embraced the Hussite cause and despised him as the betrayer of their beloved spiritual father. Moreover, the Hussites had a champion of their own. It is here we reach the zenith of Jan Zizka's life as a general of the Hussites, who he led for 5 years, about half of which he spent entirely blind, never losing a single battle.
Whoa, like, both eyes? I mean, granted, one eye is gone, but, like, he was blind in the other two? Okay, Kings and Generals didn't mention that in the battle, we saw. How do you lead with, like, no, blind? Like, you know, like, dang, that's interesting. Dude managed to never lose a battle. Dang. Okay, that's pretty impressive. I can't think of too many blind commanders that we've seen in this channel's history. In fact, I can't think of any at the moment. So that kind of makes him stand out, like, a lot. Dang, man.
It's a particularly remarkable feat when you consider what exactly Zizka was up against. On March 17, 1420, Pope Martin V declared a crusade for the destruction of the Hussites and all other heretics of Bohemia. This meant that King Sigismund's already considerable royalist forces were bolstered with cavalry from across Europe, with one of Zizka's biographers claiming that knights from over 33 nations, including Englishmen, Frenchmen, Hollanders, Spaniards, Poles, Ruthenians, and all manner of Germans,
my goodness, basically all Europe is gonna jump to, like, it's gonna unite to jump Bohemia. Wow.
all took up the cross against the Hussites, attracted to Bohemia either by the prospect of plunder or by genuine religious zeal against the heretics. The Hussites were completely outmatched, for they were predominantly made up of Czech peasants and townsfolk with little combat experience, a rabble which any column of properly trained heavy cavalry should easily be able to steamroll. And yet they weren't. Kindled by Zizka's masterful leadership, the Hussites shocked the world when, with a force of 400 farmers, women and children, they decisively repulsed the combined might of the Knights Hospitaller and Royalist cavalry at—
That's insane, honestly. The dude is outnumbered, he's blind, he's facing against superiorly trained, soldiers with knights, with superior training and equipment, and then he proceeded to lead them for 5 years and not lose a battle. That is insane. My goodness.
battles of Nekmierz and Sudomierz. These initial blows to Catholic pride were followed up by a full-force gut punch when Zizka managed to relieve the generally pro-Hussite people of Prague, whose city was being besieged by King Sigismund himself. At the Battle of Witkov Hill, just east of the city, the cream of European knighthood was dashed to bits against Zizka's well-entrenched flail and handgun-wielding dissidents. Largely because of this defeat, Sigismund's army began disintegrating, leaving almost all of Bohemia in Hussite hands.
Dang.
Although covering every single battle Zizka fought in full detail goes beyond the scope of our video, let us briefly examine the strategy he employed, which made his Hussite rebels so effective against an enemy that was consistently better armed, better trained, and more numerous than them. Zizka's time as an outlaw had made him into an expert in asymmetrical warfare, and time fighting the Teutons had given him valuable experience against the type of war waged by mounted knights. At the onset of the Hussite Wars, this experience came together to form his game-breaking stratagem, Wagenburg tactics.
Eyes up here.
HBO.
Folk and peasantry of Czechia first began filtering out of the countryside to join Zizka's revolutionary army. They understandably had little in the way of professional arms and armor, bringing with them converted farm tools like flails, scythes, and most importantly, wagons. These wagons, which Zizka would modify into combat vehicles, became perhaps the most iconic symbol of the Hussite Wars. Generally, Zizka's tactics involved choosing a well-fortified position, usually on high ground, and drawing up his wagons in a defensive square position upon it, erecting large wooden pavis shields to seal up the spaces between them. If time permitted, he would also have a defensive ditch dug along the outside of his wagon encirclement. Within each wagon would be around 15 to 20 men, armed with flails, hooks, polearms, and crossbows. Notably, the use of early firearms, such as rudimentary handguns and cannons, also supplemented the Hussite arsenal to deadly effect. In essence, Zizka created what was basically a fully fortified artillery fort on wheels, which he could park wherever he wanted.
This man is a genius. Like I said, I've never seen anyone use wagons. He basically innovated wagon warfare. Like, in the past, when we've seen wagons in the past, people usually used it, like, to just carry baggage. And, like, they usually had it, like, behind them, maybe for, like, defense or whatnot. But there's always a trend with them that once they lose the battle, they try to retreat, but then the wagons stop them from retreating, and it ends up becoming more of a hindrance. He took the wagon and turned it into a fortress, and then a mobile fortress. That is genius. He's probably one of the most innovative generals I've ever seen. Not only, like, he's really rising high in the stock in my eyes, because to do this all blind, to just so creative, like, probably one of the most creative generals I've ever seen. Maybe he's definitely up there. He might just make the top 5 at this point. Like, dang, dude.
Turned the traditionally heavy cavalry-dominated warfare of medieval Europe on its head. Mounted knights are great at cutting down rank-and-file infantry on an open field, but not so effective in siege warfare, and indeed, whenever plate mail-clad chevaliers charged head-on against Zizka's Hussite peasantry, they found themselves shredded by crossbow and gunfire, then dashed against the wooden walls of what was basically an impenetrable mobile castle. Although the first Hussite
That is so cool.
crusade had been a resounding victory for the Crusaded, there were still pro-Catholic holdouts to clear out, and in July of 1421, Zizka went to conquer the pro-Sigismund castle of Rabi. There, according to legend, a crossbowman on the castle ramparts fired a bolt at Zizka, which flew wide, instead hitting a nearby pear tree, causing a splinter of bark to take out Zizka's remaining good eye.
Ooh.
Rabi Castle would fall to the Hussites, and Zizka, now entirely blind, would continue to lead the rebel forces for many victories to come.
That's crazy, dude. This guy's awesome.
In late 1421, Sigismund launched another foray to subdue Bohemia, known as the Second Hussite Crusade. This one would go about as well for him as the first did, ending with a pair of decisive defeats at Zizka's hands at the battles of Deutschbrod and Kutna-Hora. Sigismund retreated once more with his tail between his legs.
Wow.
However, with the Hussites now deprived of a common enemy, Zizka would now have internal problems to deal with. The Hussites were never a monolithic movement, instead being composed of many factions. The more conservative Hussites, composed mainly of the wealthy citizens of Prague, only wanted moderate reforms in the church. The poorer peasants of Bohemia, however, were far more radical, wanting to annihilate things such as social class, private wealth, and taxation, seeking to destroy the root causes of Catholic greed, and return to what they saw as the pure, aesthetic Christian society described in the Bible. Zizka's faction, the Taborites, was among these radicals, and in late 1423 went to war with the more moderate faction, known as the Utraquists. Naturally, by the summer of 1424, Zizka had emerged victorious, uniting the Hussite factions under him. In October 1424, the blind war wolf Jan Zizka would embark on his last campaign. Having resolved to chase Sigismund's loyalists out of the region of Moravia, he laid siege to the castle of Pribislav. There, the old eyeless general would contract some sort of plague, and ultimately pass away. An anticlimactic end to be certain, but the silver lining is that Zizka went out with a perfect record. Despite always...
Again, dude went out undefeated. GG, bro. Like the dude's really awesome. Like, I'm really impressed by him. I still just can't get over the fact that he was blind and still, like, leading everyone. And, like, his innovative use of the wagon. Like, I can't get over it because it's just so, like genius, you know?
Being outnumbered and outgunned, he had never lost a single battle in his entire life. The impact of Zizka's death was felt by both his friends and foes. Catholics claimed that the one whom no mortal hand could destroy was extinguished by the finger of God.
Dang.
While many of
that
those
goes
who
hard.
had fought under them began calling themselves the Orphans, for Zizka had been like a father to them. After his death, Zizka's armies fell under the command of one Prokop Veliki, a capable general in his own right. Ultimately, the Hussite wars ended in something of a compromise. In the end, the moderate and radical Hussites could not coexist with one another, with the Utraquists annihilating Prokop, the Taborites, and the Orphans at the Battle of Lepani on the 30th of May 1434. Thereafter, the moderate Hussites reconciled with the Catholic Church, accepting Sigismund, who had since been elected Holy Roman Emperor, as the King of Bohemia. In return, the Utraquist Hussites became the official Church of Bohemia, albeit as an autonomous ecclesial body under the Catholic See. Had Zizka been alive, he would have been deeply displeased to see his followers annihilated and only a watered-down version of the revolution he desired achieved. However, at the end of the day, the Hussite movement was still an extremely successful one overall, having made a stand against the most powerful institutions in Europe and against all the odds, securing freedom of religion and representation for themselves in the long term, and influencing the Protestant movement. None of this would have been possible if not for the one-eyed maverick who carried the rebellion in its earliest days, making it understandable why Jan Zizka, the war wolf of Bohemia, is considered a national hero of the Czech people to this day.
Certainly. Like, I did not know about this guy until we started watching these videos, and he's already, like, proven himself so amazing and very great. The dude was just great, and I'm happy to have learned about him because holy crap. Like, that's just awesome.
We're planning more videos on medieval history.
Alright, so that definitely is, the end of the video. So overall, I think I'm pretty much done with the Hussite War era. I watched the videos regarding it, but I'm really happy to learn, to have learned about this man and his genius and his innovation. Really, he's already made it pretty high. I'm, like, planning on doing a list. I was, like, planning on maybe doing, like, a tier list or, like, a list about some of my favorite generals and commanders. The dude just shot up in that list. I think I might have put him in the top 10 just from that alone, from what I've seen. Like, really awesome. Really great guy.